Hi, this is Eric from longboxreview.com, and I'm very pleased to be here with a couple of my friends to talk about people knocking their microphones over. No, talking about DC Rebirth, the button and beyond is what I'm calling this at the moment. But I've been wanting to talk to these two gentlemen for a while about DC Rebirth. I've had conversations with them. I think both of you on mic a little bit, definitely Damian for sure. But we haven't really talked about it together like this, nor in any kind of depth beyond that first introduction. So I wanted to come back and count those chickens, as they say. So. Right. Without further ado, since Damian's on the left here on my screen, Damian, welcome to the show.
Hello, everyone. I am Damian, also known as Sleepy Reader 666 on YouTube. And I'm really glad to be back. We talked about Rebirth like after 1 month, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
Because it was early September. Did Rebirth start in July?
Well, it started in May with the special.
Oh, okay.
And then the books came out shortly after that.
Okay. It felt like it was just the beginning when we talked about it.
Yeah. And then my right-hand man, my frequent co-host, my longtime friend, Travis. Hey, buddy.
Hey, comic friends. I'm Travis. Also, you can find me on YouTube also, Oddfellow's Thoughts. I don't remember if we've specifically talked on air Rebirth. I mean, certainly we have talked Rebirth books, but I don't know that if we've done it on air or not. I don't know.
I think you're right. I think I've been wanting to get you talking with me about this stuff, and it just hasn't happened yet. So Here's our opportunity.
Yes.
You guys maybe did a Young Animals podcast.
Oh yeah, we did. Mm-hmm.
So that's tangential, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, so like I just said, DC Rebirth. So we've just. I was going to say celebrated, but we acknowledge the fact that DC Rebirth started just over a year ago. Like I said, the Rebirth special, DC Universe Rebirth special came out, I believe, in May 2016. But the announcement for DC Rebirth came on March 26th during WonderCon 2016, and I certainly. And I believe Travis was too. I'm not sure about Damian. But some of us, if not all of us, were watching that live video event announcing the whole thing. Is that correct? Did you guys watch that thing?
I did. Yep.
I watched it a day later.
Okay. So I don't know about you, Travis, but I watched that during that video. And then afterwards, I was so jazzed. I was so excited about DC Rebirth. Like I was, beside myself, I guess. Because I don't know, there was just watching it live like that, and what they were talking about. They were saying all the right things. They were pushing my buttons in terms of the things that I recognized as in the ways that the New 52 lacked. Right. So. And so they were like I said, they were pushing my buttons and saying the things that I thought I agreed that I thought was missing from the lineup from DC Comics. What about you guys? What was your reaction when you were watching that video?
I mean, that's definitely what it was for me. It felt like they kind of listed some of the, as we've talked in the past in the New 52, some of the things we thought were some of the fatal flaws of the New 52. Kind of this talked about them recognizing those as being the flaws, and we're going to fix them. We're not going to have, artificial event books. We're not going to have, all these different things. The stuff that we, like I said, we characters were always going to drive where things were going to, not the event or that sort of stuff. I'm wishing now, before we had jumped on, I had read over the written statement, the written kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, the manifesto of this is what Rebirth is going to be like, because they kind of mentioned a lot of the stuff in that I think we kind of complained about as being some of the things that we missed or wasn't there for the New 52. So I was definitely excited. I was excited because they had a pretty healthy list of people there at the con, and if not at the con, at least they knew who was doing what books. So you felt like you had a lot of advanced fanfare and whatnot about what was coming. You knew who was going to be on stuff. As a collector and a reader, I can already start planning, oh, this person's going to be on this title. I know I want that, because of, who was there or what was going on or that sort of thing. So yeah, I was definitely excited. But I'll freely admit I tend to be a sucker if I'm sitting in a room of a con on a panel and they start announcing stuff. I'm excited, and then we see whether or not I come off the high a few days later, which I didn't actually. Right up until the stuff was actually coming out, I was, other than the double shipping thing, that was the one thing that freaked me out. And there are plenty of videos, if you go back through my, plenty of videos of me saying, oh, I'm not getting any of these books. They're double shipped. There's no way it's happening. And then ultimately I got them all. So,
All right. What about you, Damian?
I was more tentative. I was actually, I'm very price motivated. So I was excited about the lower price because I felt like I could read more comics that way and sample more things. And I was I was intrigued by the idea of double shipping, actually. Although I remember hearing Travis worrying about it a lot on a lot of roundtables, and I did see his point being very valid.
Mm-hmm.
But I had liked a lot of the early New 52, and I didn't like the idea of going back to the basics initially when I heard about it. Mm-hmm. And I was quite nervous about that. I was excited over certain creators, which is ironic at the moment, but we'll get to that later. But I was very excited over Tom King on Batman. I was excited over Joshua Williamson on The Flash because I'd loved his indie work. And there were a few others that I was excited about. And I guess later we can mention the fact that I don't read those ones that I was excited about anymore.
Yeah.
But so I was intrigued, but I was a little hesitant about it. And at that point I had dropped an enormous amount of DC. So I was kind of excited to try some DC again. I was maybe lacking superheroes in my life at that point a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember from our conversation, Damian, that you seemed pretty up on the whole thing at the time, which was only a few months old at that point, I believe.
Right. By September, when we spoke, I was pretty much in love with Rebirth. And
yeah. I was hesitant at that point, right? So, and preview, it's only gotten worse from that perspective. But we'll get to that. I want to come back to something you both said about the creators, but first I just want to say there, Travis, there was, you mentioned, or you wish you'd looked for like the announcement or whatnot. I did watch the entire DC Rebirth announcement from WonderCon again in preparation for this, and so I pulled a few quotes from what Dan DiDio and Jeff Johns were saying during that thing to inform this conversation. So just to let you know, so DiDio said, he admitted to us that something was missing from the New 52, what they were publishing at that time. And then Johns came on, and DiDio didn't say specifically what that was. Johns did elaborate on it a little bit, but Johns talked about how Dan DiDio came into his office and threw what he called a creative grenade, and DiDio reportedly told Johns, "We're going to stop the issues at 52 and relaunch with an event called Rebirth." And Johns was skeptical, to say the least, considering that Rebirth has a special meaning to Johns, considering Green Lantern Rebirth and Flash Rebirth. Was that it? He only did 2 rebirths?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure he could have done more, but
he wasn't calling them Rebirth until the Green Lantern stuff. So
yeah. Well, that's true, because he essentially did a rebirth for JSA.
Right. For
many characters involved in the JSA run that he did. So yeah. Let's see what else. So Johns he said too, I'll get to that in a second. So he talked about how the New 52 and Rebirth are chapters. So he doesn't he's a fan, he talked about how he's a fan like us. And whenever he hears the term relaunch or what's the other
Reboot.
Reboot. Thank you. Those rewords, he gets really skeptical and suspicious and doesn't like that stuff. But so he referred to it, he downplayed the whole relaunch aspect as Rebirth is another chapter in the ongoing saga that is the DC Universe that started in 1938 with Action Comics #1. And I realize that's it's a bit of a marketing spin on it, but
very romantic notion. Yes.
Well, yeah, that's a much better way to put it, Travis. Thank you.
Yes.
But he did say that what's missing to me, Jeff Johns said, is legacy. And so going back to his thought about how this is Rebirth would be a new chapter, like I said, going back to the original appearance of Superman in Action Comics #1. So that was. Oh, he said one more thing. It's all about passion. He says moving characters forward without negating anything, and that's that's pretty much Jeff Johns in a nutshell. I think in terms of his contributions to DC Comics, he likes to mine the past and update things for today, and I think he's actually quite good at it. With very few exceptions, I've been very pleased with what he has produced in along those lines. I don't know about you guys.
I am not a big Jeff Johns follower, so I haven't read that much of his stuff.
Oh, okay. So it's not like you just don't like him and don't read his stuff. It's just you haven't read too much.
You two, Travis and Eric, have been, as far as I know, reading modern age DC for a long time. Whereas I was after the 80s, I was an extremely spotty reader until the New 52.
Okay.
So most of Jeff Johns' heyday was during the period where I was just glancing at things. I read a little bit of Darkest Night, but I didn't really understand it because I hadn't read enough of it or something. Mm-hmm. And so the first Jeff Johns I followed closely was in the New 52 with his Green Lantern that started with Sinestro and his Aquaman.
I have not been a Jeff Johns fan since he has been elevated past just being a writer.
Do you think he's not being edited enough now?
I don't know. I don't know if it's that or you got so many responsibilities, so he's
too busy.
I did not like the Justice League at all. The New 52 restart of all that.
I love that.
Forever Evil. I will never forgive that. That whole thing was.
Oh, I know, because you were so excited about Forever Evil before it came out, and then quickly, as soon as it came out, you were.
And Justice League America was just a lie. It was just a prop to help launch that. It wasn't even really its own title, and they tried billing it that way. See, we're gonna get off on all kinds of stuff. I would say I am no longer a fan of his writing and work. I'm not saying I think it's against Johns or his intent. But I don't think he delivers.
Okay,
Eric, have you continued to love Jeff Johns' work throughout?
I have not in the same way. Although it kind of depends. I was lukewarm on Flash Rebirth. I loved his Justice League New 52. That initial storyline I thought was awesome. Unlike my good friend.
And I only read the very first issue of his Justice League.
And his Aquaman run was spectacular.
I thought his Aquaman run was very good. I thought that was his best work of the New 52.
Yes, I would agree with that for sure. So, it just depends on what it is. But since we're talking about John specifically, let's talk about the DC Universe Rebirth special. The thing that started the whole thing, the whole rebirth phenomenon. We all read that, right, when it first came out. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
It was $1. Why wouldn't you, for like 60-ish, 60 pages or whatnot?
It was 80 pages.
80 pages for $1. How do you not get that?
Was it $1 for us because of where we get it? Because the cover price was $2.99.
Right. It was $2.99.
I knew it was cheap for the amount of pages we were getting.
Pages. Oh yeah, for sure. You definitely get your money's worth out of that one. Yeah.
And I thought it was a fun read, but that may have only made sense to people who've read quite a bit of comics already.
Well, yeah, for sure. That was not a new reader-friendly book at all.
That was the largest discussion I had on a comic book roundtable. That, you know, for those that don't know, that I, you know, kind of host every week, was the conversation was, you know, anybody who wasn't, you know, steeped in DC, you know, knowledge and lore, what did that book mean to you in comparison to those of us who've been, you know, reading and have a sense of who those characters are. You know, you get like Johnny Thunder in there and whatnot, and that's, some of that stuff is obscure even by kind of DC, you know, people who kind of know the DC kind of stuff. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that book. I thought it was fun.
Okay.
Other than one element, there's one element that I, as soon as it came up, I rolling my eyes and going, please no.
I think I can guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that same element, I was enjoying the book up to the point that element. I was enjoying the book as a deep comic book geek. Mm-hmm. And you have to be a little bit of a comic book geek to get that big element. I guess I don't know why we're hiding it, but
yeah. Let's
the button, yes.
The appearance of the famous button from The Watchmen, which leads to all kinds of implications, at least for those of us who are geeky and would think through who could have done any of those things from The Watchmen that the button represents. Mm-hmm. So we immediately, I can spoil this, right?
Oh yeah, go right ahead.
You immediately assume then that it's Dr. Manhattan who is behind all this universe changing stuff and the erasing of 10 years of memory and continuity from people and all of that stuff. But then there's also hints of Oz or Ozymandias, I think was even hinted at in that book, which is a confusing factor. He is the villain of Watchmen, but not someone with power. Yeah,
but he's a good manipulator. That's what he did, right? So did he manipulate Manhattan to do the actual deed? I mean, as far as the potential story goes and whatnot. And my issues with the button and the Watchmen stuff have zero to do with the whole Alan Moore connection to the thing. I do not care about that. That's not even a conversation I want to have right now. I mean, we could, but it's got to do with that. It's got just to do, purely with the story elements of kind of what Watchmen is and what the DC universe is. And it just feels really strange for those two things for them to use it in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, aside from my Alan Moore feelings, it seemed like something that seems cool at first, because, hey, they're bringing in something new. And then the more you think about it, the more it's just not that good of a mix with the DC universe. And I don't know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm quite surprised they didn't do this before. They didn't try and mash Watchmen up with the DC universe. How they could have easily done it for the New 52.
Right. Well, the perfect tradition of leaving it alone, which came from the Jeanette Kahn and Paul Levitt's years.
That's true.
And I think the new people who took over, new people meaning Dan DiDio and then Jim Lee and Johns, were working their way up to it because it was this sacred cow. So I think they broke the ice with before Watchmen.
Right.
And they were probably hoping to do this all along.
Yeah.
They did the before Watchmen stuff.
I think part of them probably wisely were probably afraid to touch it earlier, kind of a thing. And I agree with Damian. I think that the whole, before Watchmen stuff was kind of a feeling out process. How much heat did they really take from that? Oh, there was some complaining and there was some quote unquote bad press, but of course any press is good press, right? And so then they just took it the next step.
I have to say, Eric, when I heard you mention how Jeff Johns felt proprietary about the term rebirth, my mind flashed to, and he doesn't care about Alan Moore feeling proprietary about Watchmen.
Exactly.
It's almost like children fighting over sandboxes, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, okay, so politics aside, comic book politics aside.
Okay, I will drop that into it.
So let's... So Travis, you talked about your issue wasn't with the whole Alan Moore,
Who owns
like I
it?
said, politics side of it, but in terms of what is part of the Watchmen universe being shoved into or dovetailed into, I don't know how you want to put it, into the DC universe. So we have the button, the Watchmen button, the famous Watchmen button, and then there is some stuff at the end of the book, highly suggesting, if not outright, beating us over the head that this is Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, you get the 9-panel grid, right? You get some watches in there. You get, right. Yeah. Oh, that's all clever.
It looked cool.
Oh, Travis.
Well, and I'm even more bitter now after the other books we're going to talk about on the show.
Yeah.
Going and then look back at that now, it's even more irritating. So.
Well, so Damian, you liked the thing that Travis is objecting to, or
no. I thought it was cool when I first read it. Okay, that's cool, but at the same time, I was feeling bad about Alan Moore. But then when I thought about it a little more, I basically Dr. Manhattan, as we know him, is a human who became a god and lost all human emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And he is presented in this book as not a villain you can fight or anything like that. He's just a god. And so I don't see the value of introducing a god into the DC universe. Particularly, they've already got all kinds of levels of godlike characters. I don't know. It just seems like not a very useful... It seems like the kind of thing where writers are going to do cop-out plots.
Yeah, I worry about that too.
And on another level, I thought, well, are they going to bring in all the other Watchmen characters who were already, in a sense, spoofs of the characters from the DC universe in a way? Mm-hmm. I mean, technically they were spoofs of Charlton characters, but they were also just spoofs of all the comic book archetypes. And I use spoofs in the wrong way, but they were, they were a takeoff on those things. Mm-hmm. A semi-satiric, partial realism, but partial also satire of superheroes. So it's odd to bring the satire into the serious superhero universe to me.
Yeah.
If those characters actually show up.
Mm-hmm.
So those were my two thoughts when I thought about it a little more. But I have not read The Button very much to have any further thoughts about that.
Okay. Well, I guess perfect segue. Even though you haven't read that much. So now we have. So you jump forward now. Basically, not quite a year when they publish the 4-issue crossover series between Batman and the Flash. But
it's 20. What is it? 21 issues in, so it feels like a year in a way.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Even though they're double shipping, right?
Yeah, I mean, because it's a lot has happened.
Yeah. So yeah, issues 21 and 22 of Batman and the Flash, the Button 4-part crossover. So I know, Damian, you mentioned to me, I think before the show started, that you only read about not quite half of it, right?
Right. I had decided not to buy these issues because I had already dropped the Flash and Batman, and I don't like crossovers, and I thought this was particularly a bad idea. So all of that made me say, no, I'm not going to buy it. Then you said you wanted to talk about it, and I thought, well, maybe I could read it on these pirate sites just so I can know what people are talking about. And so I went to this pirate site that someone had linked me to, and it's covered in ads. So it's not like they're just doing it for the good of everyone who's too poor to buy comics. And I just felt gross reading it, and I kind of stopped after a few pages of the second issue of The Button.
Now, what do you mean by you felt gross reading it? Just the story itself, or
no, because it's clearly a pirate site that's trying to make money off of stealing comics. It's not just, sometimes I'd heard people talk about piracy as if it's like just a favor people are doing for other people.
It's a
But
noble,
it's a profit-making enterprise, and I was kind of grossed out. And I've never gone to pirate sites before, so I was kind of an innocent going in, or not an innocent, but I just wasn't quite sure how I would feel about reading it from a pirate site. But when I saw the ads everywhere, that sort of pushed me over the edge, and I couldn't do it.
But what you read, though, what is, I guess, what's your impression of
very little
this continuing story?
First issue.
Yes, thank you.
Very, very little happened. It was just a lot of visual references to the Watchmen, in a sense.
Yes. That first issue, it comes out and there's all this lauded, oh my gosh, 9-panel grids, which of course is, they use that in Watchmen, and everybody's, oh, it's some masterpiece because they did a 9-panel grid. So what?
Yeah.
If you don't do something with it, it's just 9 panels. It means nothing other than we've been kind of tricked into thinking if it's 9-panel grid, somehow that means it's Watchmen stuff, because of course Watchmen is the only thing that's ever done 9-panel grids, right? There weren't 9-panel grids before the Watchmen, which is ridiculous. I mean, all that stuff has existed for forever.
Right.
So I was irritated because I don't get my comic books until, Wednesdays when they come out. I don't get mine until Friday or Saturday. I was already irritated, and I hadn't read the book, to be quite honest, because everybody was losing their minds over the fact the 9-panel grid thing. And I'm like, the 9-panel grid can be cool if you're using it. And I didn't think it got used. With few exceptions, anywhere the 9-panel grid is in that first issue, it didn't get used in any way from a purely, geeky, how is a page constructed standpoint. I didn't think it was used effectively.
Wow.
Other than we were supposed to be those of us who were steeped in Watchmen, which plenty of people read this book who have not read the Watchmen would not know, would not even have that visual clue. That visual clue was supposed to be for those of us who'd read the Watchmen. And I was supposed to be impressed and all warm and fuzzy feeling because of that. And that was not the case.
Well,
I like Jason Frauenbach. I mean, I like the artist. I think that he's a great superhero artist. But that excitement around the 9-panel grid was way more interesting. It was way more interesting to watch online, like on Twitter and whatnot, all the artists and writers and stuff talk about the 9-panel grid. And then to find out that, the assumption is right, that Alan Moore controls his script so much and he's the one that does everything. In reality, Gibbons is the one that said, I want a 9-panel grid. I didn't realize that. I just assumed that Moore was a control freak, and is what I've always heard, and that it was his idea to have it that way, but it was actually Gibbons that did. So that's what came out of that. That's what I got out of that first issue, was the internet told me who actually did that for the Watchmen, and that was far more interesting than the actual book.
You're not supposed to listen to the internet for anything.
I know. I try not to.
Well, okay. So I thought, speaking of the 9-panel grid, I'll just get it out of the way. One, I don't necessarily revere the 9-panel grid in Watchmen as much as I think some people do. It was just a way to pack in a lot on a page because Alan Moore gave Gibbons so much to put on there, right? I don't necessarily think that it was groundbreaking in every usage. There were some panel or page constructions with the 9-panel grid that really forwarded the story or presented the story in an interesting way. I will agree with that. Here in Batman number 21, the only thing that I found interesting that had a 9-panel grid, and it wasn't all that interesting, but it, from a visual standpoint, it was kind of neat, is when the Reverse Flash is beating the crap out of Batman, and every panel is, if it's not 1 second, it's at least like 3 panels is 1 second or whatever. Just showing this passage of time and seeing how much damage that Reverse Flash is actually doing to Batman. I thought that was a neat visual. They could have done it in 6 panels or 1,500. It didn't really matter. So I agree with you on one hand, Travis, that there's a lot of hoopla because I saw it too. Because I like you, I get my comics later than everybody else that buy them, at their local comic shop. And for me, it was even a few days after you. So I heard that buzz about it. but I also tend to just ignore it and then evaluate it as I read it. But yeah, it does. You can't help that stuff kind of seeping in your subconscious as you're reading this stuff. So I admit, I think maybe it did color my perception of it as well a little bit. But I agree with you, Damian, that there, and not just this first issue, but the whole 4-issue thing, there wasn't a whole lot going on in terms of a plot.
No, it was a waste.
Because the first issue, basically, there's a reaction between the Button and Psycho Pirate's mask, which is continued on from the previous issues of Batman, where he has obtained the Psycho Pirate's mask. Why he has those two things out at the same time, I don't know. It seems like a bit of a plot device just to get the plot moving. But Travis, our favorite aspect of Flashpoint shows up. The Flashpoint Batman, Thomas Wayne, briefly appears.
Yes, I like that. I like that version of the the character. I mean, I liked him in the Flashpoint stuff.
Mm-hmm. But not so much at this point. I'm taking.
I'm just curious.
Well, okay, so if we're just talking all 4 books all together and whatnot, and so you have this potential of what could have been, I thought, great moments, and it was kind of an okay moment at best between dad and son, granted from different realities, who have completely different experience. One comes from the experience of my parents were killed in an alley when I was little, I become Batman. The other one is my son was killed in an alley, I become Batman. It could have been something great, and instead it was it never came through any direction that it felt like it wanted to go. It felt like they hummed and hawed around each other a little bit. Well, we could have this conversation, but oh no, the ninjas or whatever's coming to get, I don't remember what it was that attacks them, that they have to fight or whatever. And they're,
the Amazons.
Well, you're right, because it's the Flashpoint stuff still, right? So it's the Amazons and the Atlanteans were coming to them. So they have to do this fighting, and the only moment that's good about that entire thing, and for me, the entire 4 books, is the one brief moment where Thomas Wayne does go, "Don't be Batman. There's no reason for you to do that. Don't waste your life on this. Give it up. When you go back, don't do this anymore. It's not worth it. I've experienced it. It's not worth it." And whatnot. And then in the rest of the time, Batman's, "No, I want to see my dad again." I don't know. I didn't care for that. I even thought the one brief moment towards the end, the epilogue or whatever, where the bat signal goes up and he's, staring out there, and Alfred's questioning why he isn't like getting the suit on and going. That was an okay moment too. Mm-hmm. The rest of it was a giant fluff piece that leads to the very last couple pages of it, where we get the frickin' Doomsday Clock with a Superman shield at the end of it. So all this was a crossover to tell me that there's another event coming up? Are you kidding me? I spent how much money on this silliness? And if I was a real fool and I bought the lenticular covers, thank God I didn't, just to have that. So all this was 4 issues to say, hey, look, there's an event. There's another event coming. This didn't mean anything. Nothing's resolved out of this. There's other than we see a treadmill fall apart and you put a new treadmill back together again. Nothing.
Oh, hold on.
I felt that way about Reborn too, the Superman.
Yeah.
That all of that existed to set up something that's going to come into play a year from now for Jeff Johns to play with, or something.
Right.
Sure, but guys, like John said, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Like John said, Rebirth. I almost said Reborn. Rebirth is the next chapter. This Button, the crossover, and Superman Reborn, for that matter, these are just chapters in an ongoing story.
Was a meaningless chapter that should have been edited by editors and never been put out in the first place, if that's the case. If this is a book of the DC Universe, shame on the editors for not going, this was a complete waste. Let's get this out of here. Let's streamline this to make a good story.
So, okay. Well, what? Let's just talk about this briefly, because now we're being what is it? Monday morning quarterbacks. What would have made this a good story for you?
I don't know. It didn't need to exist. I mean, I wasn't going to get it. I was like, okay, I'm just going to skip this whole thing. And at the last moment, I went, no, I'm going to punch myself if I don't get this because there's going to be something in it that I'm going to want to talk about. And I guess there is. I paid good money so I can sit here and rage multiple times about how much this was a complete waste. Because it was. It didn't produce anything. There was no result out of the other end of it other than to tell me that there's another event coming. I wanted there to be some actual result of something. I mean, it didn't even have to be earth-shattering, just some actual result.
You got a result. You got Jay Garrick back.
That's a cool cover.
I have to say, that's why I pulled it up. I really like this
that cover. Is a cool cover. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. We're looking at the Flash. What is it? 22?
22, yeah.
Yeah.
For the people on the audio. When you asked Travis, what would you have liked? I mean, I think the people buying it, what they would have liked is the next real set of revelations after that Rebirth issue by Jeff Johns.
Yes.
If they want the Watchmen story in the DC universe, they want a meaty chunk of the next chapter of that. Whereas it sounds from what I've heard people say that it was just a teeny bit of setup while we just hold off because later on we want to tell the actual story. And
thank you, Damian, because that's what it did. It didn't give us any piece of it. It ultimately is the Reverse Flash shows up, does all this crazy stuff, dies. They race around to catch back up to him in time because, the whole time, craziness and whatnot, to see him basically die again and him spouting about the fact he's got the button and he knows who's in charge of the button and they've never seen anything like him before. And then he's dead. So we didn't even get, I guess that would have been satisfying if we would have actually gotten some piece, if the Watchmen's dovetailed into this in some way, that we actually got something other than just physically seeing that accursed button, that we actually gotten something of that, because there isn't anything. Like, that's why I'm saying as an editor, this is a chapter that should have never existed because it did not give us anything. It did not further anything other than literally those last pages to show us the freaking clock, to give us the Superman shield that it's kicking down to.
Okay. So I guess I might be just a DC fanboy at this point, but my perspective is still, this is just the next chapter in this saga, or whatever you want. I'm not trying to overplay it, but this is, you get a little bit of plot, furthering the plot, some tiny revelations. Like I said, we get Jay Garrick back, so they've been teasing this whole returning the JSA thing, which I just think is dumb, but that's just me. But at the very end, like you're talking about, and I agree with you to a certain degree, Travis. Those last few pages being basically an advertisement for the next thing coming in November.
Uh-huh.
Not 3 months from now, but in November, is kind of irritating. But there was that aspect of when we get the I think it was a 9-panel grid at the end of it, right, where we're almost getting the scene from, if not verbatim, definitely an homage to the scene in Watchmen where Manhattan's on Mars and he's talking to Laurie, and this is the part that I wanted to point out specifically. Manhattan says to Laurie, "We're all puppets. I'm just a puppet who can see the strings." And I thought that was a very curious bit of dialogue to quote in relation to what we learned at first in the Rebirth special, which was, it was very heavily implied that Dr. Manhattan is this force behind the New 52 and the lack of legacy, the 10 years that are missing that Wally West talks about in that issue. So I like that little bit, that little tiny nugget. It's very tiny. I will agree. But again, to me, this is just the next chapter in this. But like I said, I agree with you that it wasn't enough. It was a lot of fluff.
But it was enough for you, Eric.
It was enough to keep me interested in the overall story. But I totally agree that we did not need 4 issues of this for what was actually in it.
In the middle of 2 titles.
Yeah. It was a weird.
Cut its own one shot or its own miniseries that's its own damn thing. Why? Well, not that I'm overly excited by those 2 runs right now anyway, but this was even worse. To me, this was even worse than what I've been struggling with reading anyway.
Well, see, now that actually goes back to something that DiDio said in the Rebirth announcement, is that, they went from what was originally 52 books, right, in the New 52 launch.
Mm-hmm.
He says that questioningly, like he doesn't know, but down to 31 titles, 17 twice monthly shipping books and 14 monthly books. So, and what DiDio talked about specifically in relation to that was they didn't want to have a bunch of ancillary titles. They wanted to focus on the characters in these main books and build up momentum, interest in these other characters, these second and third rate characters, quote unquote. That's me quoting, not DiDio, but I don't like to use second and third rate, but it's the best thing I can come up with.
When you talk about building up momentum, that brings up my biggest objection to all of this. Even if Reborn and The Button were great, they interfere with the creative momentum of the books that they pass through. And I usually notice that, stories end kind of abruptly to get to the event. And then after the event, everything's kind of a mess. And it seems to take the creators a few issues to get back on their feet. I've definitely noticed that with Superman. I'm not reading Batman or The Flash, so I don't really know if that was the effect there. But that's even good events kind of ruin comic books for me, or not ruin, but make them less good.
So are you guys saying that you would have preferred an event miniseries instead of it being in the main title?
Yes,
I would definitely. Yeah.
Okay. I could totally see that. I just thought it was interesting that DiDio was saying we don't want to do things like that, like other companies do all the time. Instead, we want to build up, like I said, the interest in either the characters or the story that they're trying to tell in the main titles that they are publishing currently. So they did that with The Button. They did what they set out to do. So
how? By introducing Jay Garrick, spinning out, you're going to name one character spinning out of 4 issues and say that was value for what happened?
I'm not saying that.
Then I'm confused. That he set out to do what he was supposedly what they said they were going to do.
I'm not saying that they succeeded at it. I'm just saying that they attempted it.
That was their illusion. Okay.
Did they learn anything about The Button in this course of this 4 issues called The Button? Flash and Batman?
I think that it comes from somebody. Duh.
Did The Button help them travel between universes?
No. They used the cosmic treadmill. The classic.
Well, no. If I recall, it's the radiation or whatever, the energy from the Button they're able to trace to go after the Reverse Flash using the treadmill. So there is that. I mean, that's a minor plot point, really.
So this may be pushing things too far, Eric, but talking about this with you makes me think of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. That
careful, sacred ground here.
Button event and this Watchmen event is like the equivalent of that first Star Trek movie, where they just had this really long, stretched out, loving, endless kind of prologue to the actual movie, because they thought it was just so cool that they were doing a Star Trek movie. So like a 20-minute panning shot across the outside of the ship, it seemed like, and that kind of stuff.
That movie was a lot better than this 4 issues.
Ooh.
But it seemed like the whole project so far, stretched out over a year and just giving us a few shots.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's so wonderful that we just want to stretch it out forever. And I want them, if they're going to do this, to do it like Wrath of Khan, not like Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Quite honestly,
that's a good analogy.
Quite honestly, to me, the end of this, the 4 issues of the Button felt like it was an afterthought. In that, when they started out, they had something else going on, and then suddenly we had the Superman stuff going on with now we've got yet another new Superman, because it's not the Rebirth Superman, it's not the New 52 Superman, it's some in between Superman, whatever
amalgamation. Yeah,
right. I'm still.
Yeah, that was totally
I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. At any rate, so and out of that, and I don't know, Jeff Johns decided he wants to write a comic again, or I'm not sure what. It feels to me like that the ending of the Button might have been something else, and then they decided to add those black pages, and then there's going to be another one. I don't know. To me, it felt like somewhere between originally, let's do this Button thing, and it's starting to get executed. They came up with another storyline and went, dang, let's do this. And so then they added that Superman stuff at the end. That's what it felt like. It felt like it was not part of the original plots.
Well, based on some things that I've read, it's actually, just from my perspective, it seems like it's actually reversed of that they wanted to do what Johns is going to do in November, but he didn't have the story quite gelled. I mean, he did talk about in an interview I read about Doomsday Clock that I think they originally intended to do this much sooner, but for various reasons, he wasn't able to get the story that he wanted to tell kind of gelled in his mind. And again, just me, I think maybe the Button was inserted to kind of satiate some of us out there going, what's going on with this? We had DC Rebirth, the DC Rebirth special, last May. Why haven't we got anything about this?
You would be the only person of the DC fans that I know that have been sitting around clamoring for when's the next thing coming.
I wouldn't say I've been clamoring.
Okay, but I don't think anybody has. It was like, that was a curious way to relaunch the series. And then we all forget about it in some sense or another. If they do something with it, fine. If they don't, they don't. And we all roll along. We're all rolling with Rebirth to whatever level we like it or not.
Well, maybe they're saying...
the whole thing irritates me further because those of us who are reading the Superman books now, I think we all are reading at least some of the Superman books, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every damn issue of anything that's Superman related, it's now all, there's some evil pending coming and I need you ready for it. That's what every issue of every Superman oriented book is. I guess I don't know about Action Comics because that's the one super related book I'm not getting into. And I guess Super Sons hasn't said that yet, but I figure it's coming in that book too. Like, really? And it's not going to happen until November? So I'm going to have to spend...
So maybe it's all at service to Jeff Johns. He's saying, well, I want you to keep the Button and Watchmen in people's minds.
See,
but
now I'm liking Jeff Johns less and less.
Oh, jeez.
That's a guess, of course. But
I think you're right. I think that's exactly what this is. But anyway, was there anything good about, before we get out of the Button? Because there's a couple things I wanted to point out, but I want to see from you guys. Was there anything at all that you liked about the Button? Any aspect whatsoever?
I haven't made that clear already. No, I mean, really? There's the little brief moments of, like I said, I like Thomas Wayne going, "Don't be Batman," and I found it curious towards the end there where Batman is just watching the bat signal go off and him not really responding to it. Beyond that, a cool cover for that issue of the Flash. Otherwise, no.
Really? So there's a couple things I want to point out just to get your reaction then. So there was that one large panel in Flash 21 with the Justice League Hall of the Lost and Found. I mean, this is pure fanboy stuff, right? That I'm going to talk about. But that I don't know about you guys, but I really love it when we see artists throw in the callbacks, the homages to things in panels like that, where they have this large collection of stuff that the Justice League has, and it's like little Easter eggs that you go and look and find, and like I said, like fanboys love that kind of stuff, and I just thought that was a cool thing.
That was fun. I think that must have been in part of what I read.
Yeah, I think so. Then there's a mention of hyper time. Again, that's a fanboy thing. A callback to that Flash concept that Mark Waid. I think it was Mark Waid that introduced. No, it was Grant Morrison, but Mark Waid ran with it. Pardon the pun, in his Flash run. So just little things like that. But yeah, okay. Let's get off the button.
Well, so I mean, you can say more things you liked about it, Eric. Well, maybe there are people, and maybe you're one of them, who like this really stretched out mystery with just very little clues for a long time.
And I certainly have no problem with that. If people loved it, they had a great time with it, awesome. It just, for me personally, and I don't think any amount of conversation is going to like convince me otherwise.
No, I know that's not going to convince
you. Right. But I mean, that's cool. If people dug it, they thought it was fun and whatnot. I'm not a huge part of it is I'm not a huge Flash fan either, really. Mm-hmm. For me, most of my experience of the Flash, he's an instrument. He for so long now, since what year was that? 86, 87? Flash for me has been this instrument to change the DC universe. The whole the Flashpoint stuff, the Crisis on. I mean, he's always this kind of the person that runs and disappears and falls apart, and then at some point, he's going to come back. That's all cool and fine, but I don't really have interest beyond that, kind of a thing.
Well, actually, I'm quite bored with that whole concept, quite honestly. Yeah. I mean, they played it through with Barry Allen, Wally, sure. Barry again, yep. and now Jay Garrick, right? Yeah. So I don't know. But back to your point, Damon. Yes, I am one of those people that I like number one. I like the DC universe. I like the history. I like the fact that we've relaunched it a bunch of times. Just generally speaking, I have my issues with it, with every iteration of the DC universe. But I like the long time overall overarching storytelling that's going on, and how that plays into the universe as a whole. And this is just, again, I'm overusing this word, but it's another chapter in that, and I don't mind that so much. The little nuggets that we got in the button. Again, frustrating that of what we got. Well, I agree with Travis, we could have gotten a little bit more out of it, but I'm okay with that too. At the same time, I'm like a lot of things about DC. I'm of two minds. I'm critical about some things, but mostly I forgive them because I love these characters so much. And maybe that's part of the problem, is that I'm one of those guys that will support the company no matter what kind of crap they throw our way.
Well, I'm a DC fan. I mean, that's, there's no doubt about it. That's, the lion's share of what I read as far as superhero books is that and whatnot. But I guess, and I love the long history of it. And, and I can recognize those little things that are in this 4 issues and whatnot, but I don't think it's enough. And I don't think it's done well. And I guess I have an expectation that stuff should be there. This stuff should all be, planned out. If you're hinting that you've heard that this was kind of a potentially a half-assed thing they threw in because they need to kick the real story down the road, they should have just not done it. There was no reason for this. Granted, now maybe long term it'll be proven differently. We'll get whatever we get in November, and then this is all going to be linchpinned perfectly. And I'm going to go, I'll eat my words. I'll be on somebody's show, my show, whatever, going, okay, so now that whole button thing is now sweet. It all works out and whatnot. I sincerely doubt that. I don't think that's going to happen, but I'll certainly admit it if that's what it ends up being. But like I said, I'm a huge fan. I love all this stuff. I mean, anybody who's watching video wise clearly like Batman. But I don't know. I don't feel like this 4 issues was put together in a way that was representative of what DC wants to do or what they could do. I don't think.
It could just simply be that someone decided we should tell some story because we haven't really done anything with what came out of Rebirth, and was it King and Williamson and Porter and Fabok? They developed this thing, but it wasn't. Maybe they didn't have quite the direction that they needed.
Yeah,
because Johns didn't have everything gelled. Like I said, I don't know. It's
and part of me wondered. I mean, was this initially just kind of somebody needs a break? The regulars on the books need a break, because I don't think King actually writes it. I think he's credited for plot,
you're right.
But Williams is actually credited for actually doing the scripts and whatnot.
That's
so
true.
I don't know if he was taking a break during that. Kind of like some of the other, like the Monster Men crossover that was in the Batman, Nightwing, and all that kind of stuff. That kind of gave some of the regulars a break, because people came in that weren't part of the book normally because of that too. So if this was that, you know what? I'd be less hard on it. I guess I'd be less critical on it if that's what this was. If this was just the fluff they put in between because those people needed a month off to get caught up, or to have lives beyond making comic books or whatever. But to hype it up as being the next linchpin in the DC universe, you point out these little things. I think those things are just super, super small, and do not hold enough value for what we paid and my time that I wasted reading that stuff.
So a couple more thoughts, and then I want to move on to our last topic. Unless you guys have something else, was that okay? So like at the end of the button, we see that bit with quoting Dr. Manhattan, and then like you said, Travis, showing the shield. I'm like, what the hell is that about, right? But what I was thinking was, if based on that quote, that Manhattan is just someone who is a puppet who sees the strings. Who's the puppet master then, if not him, right? So who is the big bad? Who ultimately will be the big bad of Doomsday Clock, if it's not Dr. Manhattan? So I from a storytelling standpoint, I find that interesting. That we're the misdirection perhaps, although it's not really at this point, but well, it could be actually as to who the bad guy is. But I do have especially after now reading some of the material or the interviews that Johns did after the button came out, well, I'm wondering, well, is Johns and by extension DC, are they just simply overreaching with this whole concept? And it sounds like perhaps with the, if the button is any indication of what is to come, sounds like maybe they are.
Oh yeah.
So how, in other words, how disappointing is this going to be in the end come November?
I think it's a mistake. I mean, unless it ends up being, whatever's the end of it ends up being awesome, I think it's a mistake.
So wait, given that we had the Rebirth special and what happened there, you would be satisfied if they just simply ignored that whole thing, the reason for what came out of Rebirth with the Watchmen and the button and the 10 years and all that. Just forget about that and just move on with whatever we have going on in the main titles.
Yeah.
Huh. I mean, it really was intended as some setup for rebooting the universe in a way where they brought Legacy back, right? And that's the real point of it. And the plot that they made up for it is just a gimmick to get there. Sure. So if they want to satisfy people who want to know how did we get from A to B, they could have done a 6-issue mini off on the side to complete the story for those people who are interested, and then let all the books go off on their own. From there, playing with the legacy the way they've been handed it. But instead, they're kind of stuck with Jeff Johns' needs or something over years.
So the time frame aside, I think that's exactly what they're doing. It's just that they put it in the Batman and Flash title for that first part of it with the button, and then we're going to get this, like I said, this next chapter come November. So to me, it's the same thing to me. It's just taking too long to do it. It's almost 2
because when you
years.
thread it through all the books, you create ancillary damage all over the place.
Well, that's always the risk they run when they do something like this.
Right.
DC is fraught with, its history is fraught with relaunches that mess things up or just gone bad. It's not just Crisis, it's not just Flashpoint and Rebirth. We had 0 Hour. After Crisis, the Superboy punching through dimensional barriers, and that was Infinite Crisis, right? Just all the aborted attempt at relaunching the DC Universe after Final Crisis. That was, what the heck was that about, right? It's just they have that's what it comes back to, the overreaching ideas, that they have these grandiose ideas about what they can do with their universe, and most of the time I think they just miss it. They just miss the mark.
True. And that's why I hardly read any Marvel anymore. And I have really been loving Rebirth, maybe more than you guys, even though you guys had more anticipation at the beginning than I did. And the longer it's not, I've dropped a few titles because they got messed with. And now I'm wondering if I need to drop Superman because that's being messed with so much.
Well, this is a perfect segue then to our final topic, which is, what do we think of Rebirth now after just over a year? Like I said, they had 31 titles at launch. I just counted them before the show started. In previews, they now have 32, 14 twice shipping, unless my count is off, and 18 monthlies. And this doesn't count Young Animal. This doesn't count Vertigo, the miniseries and whatnot. This is just their core superhero titles that I counted.
And nothing's been canceled yet. I think that's some kind of record.
I think you're right.
In the New 52, a whole bunch of books were canceled at number 7.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And everything now is up to like number 11 or number 22, and nothing's been canceled, which I think is pretty amazing.
I think part of that is, I think they learned from the New 52 to stagger stuff a little bit better. I mean, New 52 came out and it was like every week there were like 7 titles. And I mean, that was one of my criticisms of the New 52 stuff was, how does Resurrection Man compete when it's released on the same week that Justice League and Batman is? People are going to spend their money on the known element, and no one ever spends their money on the unknown element, kind of a thing. So I think that's some of why the books have survived, is they've been staggered out more for people to kind of spread their money out across. Because I mean, this stuff got released over these titles all got released over what was it, like
it was
3 or 4 months, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you're right. So there's that, and there's that they are not putting out things like Resurrection Man. They're saving that for Young Animals. They're keeping it separate.
Yeah.
I think what excited me about the New 52, but turned out to be a mistake, was bringing in a lot of Vertigo-esque kind of characters into the main continuity, and the main label, really.
Right.
So the expectations were, that your sales were competing with Batman in a sense. Whereas Young Animals, their sales probably aren't looked at in the light of Batman, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
Batman's sales, I mean.
Right. So I got everything. As DC released everything, I literally read every new book that came out because I got ordered my comics through Discount Comic Book Service.
You had those bundles, right? That
right.
cost you almost nothing.
Right. It was half price, and at half price, it was just. I mean, it was still spendy in comparison to what I was spending on comics, but I figured at half price, it was worth just trying them all out just to see what that all ultimately ended up being like. I think I went 4 months of getting everything. So by the 5th month, that first bundle that was released, I started dropping stuff out of that I wasn't interested in. So I got at least the first 5 or 6 issues, depending on whether it was double shipped or once a month, everything. So I read the first, trade worth of all of the books. just putting it out there as far as what I read, just to get a read of an impression of what was coming out and what I might like. Because I tried to look at the whole Rebirth thing as being, because there are characters that I'm just not really that interested in, but I tried kind of going, okay, I'm just going to be open to whatever's out there and to see what it's all like and see what maybe is just a cool book that maybe I wouldn't have gotten just because my own personal bias of, I don't care for Aquaman, so I would never pick up Aquaman. I don't like Hal Jordan, so I'd never pick up Hal Jordan. But here I end up reading those books, because of the price tag that was on them. I could afford to do that. So.
Mm-hmm. And Damian, what about you? Did you start out reading everything?
I don't think I got everything because I had to pay for them individually, but I got a lot. Yeah. And some I dropped immediately because it wasn't for me. A few I dropped, and then other people told me, oh, it got really good. And I got back on them and really liked them. Like Detective. I didn't like the first issue of Detective, but then I ended up liking it a lot. Aquaman, the first issue seemed very derivative of Jeff Johns, but then it's gone off in its own direction, and it's now one of my favorite books. That's part of being part of this reading community on YouTube, that I would hear about these things and get back on them. Yeah. And now I've gotten to the point where I've dropped a lot of stuff I was liking because it's just more than I can handle every week.
In terms of cost, or
no, I'm wildly wealthy, but it's not too expensive. But I just couldn't keep up with the reading. I really can maybe read 12 comics a week, and there were a lot of indies I wanted to read. So I have. And I'm still reluctant to drop things, but I have a number of ones that I'm way behind on. Like I really liked, suddenly forgot his name,
Deathstroke.
Deathstroke. I was really liking that, but now I'm like 6 issues behind. I don't know if it's still good, but I don't want to let go of it. But I've dropped a number of things that I was enjoying, but thought I could do without. But I do prioritize, like, they're my popcorn reading, and a lot of them have remained good popcorn reading to me. But I often, Paper Girls or whatever comes to the top of my pile, and Kill or Be Killed, and then I read, whatever DC ones I have time for because they're fun, but they're not my priority books. So I'm still struggling with what to drop, and I really don't want to drop the 2 Superman books I get, but I feel like maybe they've jumped the shark and it may be too late for them.
Yeah, that's how I'm feeling.
And that makes me really sad because those were 2 of my favorite titles. They were really good.
Right. Yeah, Superman for me is one of those huge surprises. I have never been able to get into Superman since, John Byrne's Superman in the 80s. I have tried every Superman title that's come out, thinking when a new one comes out, thinking this is the time. This is the one it'll intrigue me. I'll be interested, and I have not enjoyed it, but I've really enjoyed. Shockingly, Superman has been one of my favorite books to come out from DC. I've been really enjoying that book, and ever since the whole reborn thing, it's just I feel disconnected with that character. I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm one of the characters in the DC universe who doesn't get this new version of Superman. Yeah. I guess I just don't. I don't know. And it's weird because it's the same people writing him. And maybe that's good on them for writing him differently. But it just, feel it just feels uncomfortable in a way. So I don't know how much longer. And I'm reading it. I'm reading Superwoman. I'm reading the Super Sons, and Superwoman has just been completely bogged down by the whole crossover thing. It's just really multiple issues now have been messed up with it just being kind of them stammering around the aftermath of the Rebirth stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I'm waiting for the next arc basically to kind of see what's next for it. But I think I'm like Damian. I'm worried now after the Button thing, seeing that shield at the end. I can pretty much expect, right, Eric? I can pretty much expect that my Superman comics are going to get bogged down again come November.
Bogged down, enhanced, whichever way you want to look at it.
Well, and Action also. Action was a surprise for me because the writer on it,
Dan Jurgens.
Jurgens was never a favorite of mine. Yeah, but I was really enjoying Action until Reborn, and now it's been what I would have expected from Jan Jurgens, just blah Superman stories. It's like they just pulled the air out of the entire Superman family with that. And yeah, the whole Superman was a huge surprise. I mean, there was hope because it was Tomasi and Gleason on it. Yeah, so now I'm looking around and wondering how much more is going to be ruined. Before we went on the air, I was asking you guys about this new Batman metal thing, and I'm worried what books is that going to start ruining. I'm still enjoying Detective. I decided to drop the Tom King Batman, thinking I might get back onto it someday, but I just thought I'd leave it alone for a while because it was irritating me and I had too many other books to read. But I did pick up the Swamp Thing book, the issue with the Swamp Thing, and I'm still scratching my head over it. Did they kill Alan Moore on the first page? That character that got shot is the father of the Swamp Thing.
I don't know. I don't know if it actually was, but I love that idea.
Oh my God. I didn't even realize that. That was, oh, wow. Okay. Well, okay. So, it's interesting that you both said some things that correspond to how I was kind of interacting with the rebirth stuff. Like Travis, I because of DCBS, you know, I jumped on the bundles and got probably not. You said the first 4 months worth, right, Travis? I think I did 3. I jumped out before you a little bit. Whereas on the New 52, I tried everything. You know, even if it was just for one issue, I tried every title that they put out, and it was things like Resurrection Man, like you guys were talking about, that I really liked. That they were trying these new things, right? Even though they may not have worked for me, I still tried it out just to support that idea and to see what, you know, to be surprised. Maybe I would really like this. When they went to Rebirth, though, and they consolidated everything into their core characters, which I understand why they'd want to do that, but then you do that at the expense of all these other characters, which I get don't sell. Not on their own necessarily, right? I'm like, you know, Hawk and Dove just jumps right up there at the top of my brain when I talk about that because I love those characters so much. But I know they don't sell. They don't sell for very long, at least, right? So I get it from a business standpoint, but from a fan standpoint, if all I'm seeing is Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, you know, the Justice League characters essentially, with a few others just thrown in there, I just wasn't, I guess I didn't care for that. And so I was dropping, and, you know, I think even we talked about this on the one episode that, you know, where Damian and I talked about the Rebirth initially. I wasn't all that excited about some of these things. And there were certain titles that I just simply would not try because I knew I wouldn't like them. Red Hood and the Outlaws, for example. I just knew I wouldn't like it, even though they were redoing it.
That was another surprise one that was good despite.
Was it? See,
it's been fun. It's been a fun book.
I'm probably majorly missing the boat on that one.
So that makes it easy for you, though. Clearly, you don't like that character. There's no reason why you'd read it.
Yeah, exactly. That's true.
I'm a bit puzzled because you are the most hardcore DC fan of us. But when it's hardcore DC all the way, it's too much hardcore DC for you.
But I see what Eric's saying. It's really not. DC circled their wagons for Rebirth and despite their idea that we're bringing it all back, because supposedly New 52 just chopped every legacy character, all that kind of stuff just disappeared. It was actually bigger. It was actually a bigger universe than now the Rebirth, which is supposed to have basically, hey, we're re-embracing it all, that 10-year, whatever wishy-washies, you know, now anything goes kind of a stuff. But in reality, they didn't. They truncated it down. I mean, even the new books that are coming out that are, you know, with new characters or newish characters, like Super Sons, for instance, they're not new characters, though. They're a Superman and a Batman analog, you know, that just continues the same. I enjoy that book. Don't get me wrong. I love it to death. But it really is. The DC universe is very red, white, and blue. It's very small.
That's why I wasn't excited about Rebirth, and I was excited about the New 52. But then I flipped and I said, okay, this actually is fun to have all the superheroes. And I felt a bit of relief when Young Animals came out, when the Flintstones came out.
Yes.
And sort of with some of the miniseries they've done, although that hasn't been as successful. But because I probably would not have jumped back into DC with the New 52 if there weren't the Swamp Thing and Animal Man and OMAC and all of that. That actually drew me in because and then I was just already there. Now I'm back into DC because of those things, actually. But obviously I don't represent the average reader of DC Comics.
So we've been talking a lot about our reaction to the books, but I wanted to touch on just the overall approach, how successful Rebirth was from the standpoint of why they wanted to, what John said, what's missing to me is legacy. DiDio said something was missing, and they wanted to address that with themselves creatively, and of course with us fans. So what do you think? Did they meet their
mission statement?
Not really.
I can't really tell.
Yeah, I'm enjoying a lot of the books, but those kind of really kind of lofty statements, that they aren't very. How do you test that? I mean, the only way I could say they were successful at that is if I picked up a book and it just had gobs of characters in it, right? I mean, because me and Eric, we both know there's this, we've got these who's, in our comic book collection. There's thousands of DC characters. It seems like it would take a lot to get them back in the books after having gotten rid of a whole bunch of them, right? Mm-hmm. So how would they really do that? I mean, did they successfully bring legacy characters back because there's a Titans book? I mean, is that our?
That's a great question. Is that enough?
Is that no? Because I don't care for that book. So, but yeah, I don't. But yeah, I mean, it really has. I mean, because if you say legacy characters to me, I start going, oh, there's all that Earth 2 stuff. There's there's the original Infinity Inc. There's all those kind of secondary characters. The next version of Wildcat, the next version of Hour Man. That's what I start thinking because of the era of fan that I am. When you start saying legacy, that's what I'm thinking about. I don't know what they mean when they say legacy.
Exactly.
Are they saying, hey, we're bringing all this legacy back, and the fact that they're going to admit that the whole New 52 superheroes have only existed for 5 years really sucks because it makes everything so small, and they want to be able to use the whole sandbox again. So now supposedly it's wide open. And if that's the case, then maybe they're successful in the fact that, I think on Twitter or whatnot, we've kind of questioned, Eric, me and you, back and forth. Does it feel like they're using the same villains over and over again and kind of the same stories? Like Nightwing, for instance, they're just kind of kicking the same. Okay, they're touching the stuff that Grant Morrison just wrote about, but that's legacy, right? That's legacy. Well, and that is part of superhero comics. You keep fighting the same villains over and over and over again, right?
It's meta now. But okay, I want to make sure we don't just define legacy as legacy characters, because I think it goes beyond that. I mean, they wanted to, like John said, what has he said? Moving characters forward without negating anything. Mm-hmm. Are they doing this?
Maybe the legacy aspect at least gave the writers, for a while until the events take over, the feeling that they aren't hampered by a really tight, the 5-year schedule of the of the New 52. They aren't having to dance around that kind of continuity, and so the continuity is a little wider open for them, and they feel a little freer, maybe. But at the same time, we're told we're going to do the main heroes and we want their main villains to show up. Maybe Batman's the one exception of that, but everyone else started out with, their really famous villains in their first arc.
Well, just to prove that point a little bit more, that was my big objection in the Dan Jurgens Action Comics. It seemed like they were throwing in all the, like you, Travis, you mentioned Nightwing, but in the Action Comics, it was like all these 90s and 2000s villains from the Superman comics. Like, what? Why are we retreading the past in this way? Now, it's come to pass that there was a purpose to that. It wasn't just to retread old characters in a similar way. There, in story, there was a reason for it. So I appreciate that. But at the time, I was like, why do I need to read essentially the same story again all these years later, with really nothing new thrown my way? But in comparison, you get oh gosh, now it just went out my head. I guess the Green Lantern Corps. You get, of course, that's not a very good example either, because even with the New 52, Green Lantern was that 5-year thing that you mentioned. Green Lantern essentially was untouched by that.
Right. And Jeff Johnson ignored that continuity.
Yeah, exactly. So I was going to say in the Hal Jordan and Green Lantern Corps comics, there's stuff extending way back, but it's sort of an exception to the rule. So I'm not, well, okay. Batman, Tom King, whether you like what he's doing on Batman now or not, he's kind of like Grant Morrison light in one fashion, in that he's bringing in things that have occurred in past Batman comics and touching on them in a slightly different way. That's actually why I like Tom King on Batman, even though that's not really Batman to me. It's more like a guy who dresses up like Batman, but from a literary standpoint, I mean, this is the most literary Batman that I've read since Grant Morrison, maybe even more so. I will boldly state. But I from a writing standpoint, I really like what Tom King is doing there, and I like how he's bringing in that legacy, for lack of a better word. It may not be the best example, but it's just off the top of my head. That's what occurred to me. So,
yeah, ultimately I don't care about legacy. I just want to read good stories, and I don't really care where the stories came from or not.
Sure.
Ultimately that's where I am too. I mean, I love that. I mean, because I am a DC nerd, and I love all that stuff, but I want it to be used in a way that's I rather just deliver on a good story.
So are you guys getting good stories? It sounds like, Damian, you are to some degree.
Yeah. I'm just nervous that it won't last, but
sure.
And
everything in comics is cyclical.
It's part of being an old comic book reader. You get more and more nervous about seeing things go bad, because they always do eventually, right? That's just inevitable. At least in the cycles of the big two commercial superhero comics.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Travis?
I find the whole thing interesting. There's stuff that I'm in, like I said, I'm enjoying that up until recently, like the Superman stuff, super excited, been getting a real kick out of that. Always been fun to read. And some of the stuff that I've been finding really interesting about the River stuff, the double ship, for instance. I was so worried about that. I mean, there are, like I said, when it first was announced, there are tons of videos out there, me adamantly, twice a week saying there's no way in hell I am buying a book that's double shipped, because I don't think the creators can do it. The art's going to fall down. It's going to be inconsistent. It's going to, the story's going to be stretched out. And to start out with, I liked a lot of that stuff. And some of those books I still like, them being, the double ship and whatnot. But there are other books where if they have problems, if there's something about them that they're not quite up to me wanting to spend that kind of, I don't get time to forget about the things that are bugging me about the book before I get the next one in my hands, 2 weeks later. So then it's like, oh, this is really starting up. And then, so then that starts to become, for me, the emphasis of the book. And so I've started dropping stuff. I mean, I really was excited about Green Arrow when it first came out, was really enjoying it. And then it just kind of hit this mark of, well, the writer that's on it was writing it before, when it was part of the New 52. I wasn't enjoying that. It seemed like maybe the Rebirth was like a a rejuvenation for that writer. Maybe he had more freedom. I don't know what. He suddenly was inspired to write other stories. Maybe just the injection of Black Canary being back in Oliver's, in Green Arrow's life. I like that couple. I even when the relationship is bad, I like them as a couple, even when it's a train wreck. And so I was enjoying that aspect of it for a while. But I still like the artists that are on the book, but the chinks in the story started showing up when I started getting it every 2 weeks. I'm having the same problem with Nightwing. Also, I'm reaching a point where, because I don't have that. I mean, if it was a monthly book, I keep reading, I keep enjoying it because I'd read it, I'd enjoy it. The things that kind of bother me about it, I would kind of forget about some of those aspects. When I go to read the next one, it would be okay. But every 2 weeks, it's just like it drills home the problems, and I think the problems exist. I think in a lot of cases, the stories, I'm not getting more story. It's taking the same 3 or 4 months to tell the same story. It's just now I'm getting it in 6 to 8 issues instead of 4 or 5 issues. It to some degree. All the things I worried about double shipping are now starting to show up. I think initially they had things tight, and I think they had it under control. But as we're getting farther and farther along, I'm sure it's hard to keep that schedule. I mean, because they struggle with keeping a monthly comic, right? So we get these books that are coming out every 2 weeks. Those books are becoming less desirable for me. And I really think it's the double ship. So that's a really interesting thing about the whole Rebirth for me, just trying to decide what do I want to keep reading that's double shipped. And those are the books I'm starting to drop more and more of, as those. Even a monthly book that comes out that's maybe not like super great, I'm actually enjoying it more because I'm only seeing it once a month. Mm-hmm. Not real happy that they bumped the price of $1 and give me a digital code I'll never use, but that's a whole other complaint. So.
Okay, so go ahead.
I wanted to address the same question because I find that certain writers do the bi-month or twice a month rhythm really well, and so I actually like it a lot. I find, much to my surprise, that James Tynion is really good at that. And so I find Detective really good. And I feel like Dan Abnett on Aquaman is really good at it. So that something about the way those two pace their comics makes them very good to have them come out frequently. Some others, I see what Travis is saying. You start seeing more and more problems develop. I agree, Nightwing is a little shaky. I think for whatever reason, Scott Lobdell turns out to be good at doing a bi-week, whatever it's called, twice a month comic. I found Greg Rucka a little rough even though he had 2 stories going. I find that a hard comic to read somehow, the way it's paced. I'm referring to Greg Rucka on Wonder Woman. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of other ones, but those are my big example. Oh, and Pete Tomasi seems pretty good at the rhythms of it. And I think most of these people who are good give us like a 6-issue story and then a 3-issue story or 2-issue story. They get kind of a set of rhythms going rather than just one rhythm going, maybe. Mm. And that works well for me.
Yeah. So what has been, since you mentioned Greg Rucka on Wonder Woman, because that book for me has, well, I'll just ask the question. So what were you looking forward, like the top thing you were looking forward to the most when the announcement came? And then when you got it, what was your reaction to it?
Well, for me, the one I was looking forward to the most was Tom King. And then when that first arc started, which was about Gotham Girl and Gotham Man, or whatever they were called, Gotham and Gotham Girl, I think. Yeah. I just felt very uninvolved, and I didn't feel the the intellectual storytelling rigor that Tom King usually brings to other things I've read by him. So that was a big disappointment. And I think once the second arc started, I just decided to give it a break and thought maybe I'll read it in trade someday or digital sale or whatever. So that was my biggest disappointment. I wasn't sure whether I would like Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman, and I've kind of liked it, but also had trouble just sort of keeping track of it somehow. That switching back between stories didn't work that well for me.
So for me with Wonder Woman, of course, super excited about it. I'm a big Greg Rucka fan. I pretty much, he normally does not fail me on anything. I mean, I can think of one or two stories that were flat, but otherwise, like I said, I pretty much buy most Rucka work sight unseen. I don't even read the solicitations. His name's on it. I get it. So clearly, I'm a fan. I've enjoyed the Wonder Woman run, and I like the two separate stories that have slowly gotten closer and closer kind of together as to why both parts make sense and whatnot. Now, I mean, there's certain things where it felt like the beginning of that, especially like the Rebirth issue before the actual series started and whatnot, they really floated this, she doesn't remember her, she's one of the people that's highly affected by time was gone. She's been kind of lied to. She doesn't know what her true origin is or isn't. Have we answered that by the end of this thing? I don't have the last books, but I would say no, we probably didn't. We've just now got another, kind of, this is the current definitive who she is and why she is kind of a thing. I'm fine with that. I know good and well, this is corporate comics, 5 years from now, maybe less, I don't know, clearly more, someone else is going to come along and be the seminal writer to change that again at some point. Whatever, that's fine. I mean, I know that's going to be the case. I mean, I know as a Wonder Woman fan, that's sometimes frustrating because Superman's origin never changes, really. Batman's origin never changes, really. Why does Wonder Woman's keep changing? That's a flaw that I guess there's a lot of discussion as to why that is. But anyway, I enjoyed the two books. I enjoyed that. It was a twice a month that I enjoyed because I was reading two Wonder Woman books, and that's how it felt to me. I mean, I know some people had a beef with the fact that it's all part of the same run, but it's not the same book. Well, when they put those things out in trade, they literally put out, the odd books and the even books, so it's read as a single story, kind of a thing, as opposed to.
I feel I need to go back and read it that way. I think I wasn't flip-flopping between stories.
And I like his approach. I like it feels to me like he has a really good understanding of what Wonder Woman should represent. It matches up with my ideas of what Wonder Woman should represent. So the book works for me. Now, I'm not as excited about it as I thought I was going to be. I mean, when that got announced, I'm literally sitting in my chair going, yeah, when I'm watching the video live and I hear he's doing Wonder Woman and whatnot. And then they float Nicola Scott as being one of the people who's going to be on the book. I'm just like, super stoked by that. Now, was the book as good as what in my brain I was excited for it to be? No, it wasn't, but I really enjoy it. It's a book I'm always enjoy reading, but it's not like, oh my God, did you read Wonder Woman?
Interesting. So like you, Travis, the Rucka announcement, I wasn't quite as exuberant as you were, but I was really excited about that because I had gotten his run on Wonder Woman before he basically left DC Comics and loved it. So I was very excited about it. And then I started reading it. And it's probably the most disappointing book out of the ones that I was getting from Rebirth. For various reasons. I don't want to get into the specifics of it. It's just that was I was really excited about it. It did not deliver for me what I thought I was potentially going to get out of it because of the creative team, mostly Rucka on it. It's probably one of the very few books of his that I can say I was disappointed in the execution of it. In fact, so like I said, I got like the first 3 months worth of bundles from DCBS for these, but I very quickly, in some cases, even though I'd ordered them because I had to order those 3 months, even though I'd ordered them, I read the first issue, not the Rebirth issue, because I considered the Rebirth issues just kind of zero issue, introductory fluff that I really didn't need, but I got them anyway. But I would read the very first issue of the series, and I knew I wasn't going to continue with it. It was a very weird moment of clarity for me on many of the books. You know, Batgirl was one of them. Batgirl and the Birds of Prey was another. I'm not trying to pick on Batgirl, but those are the only two that come to mind at the moment.
I dropped for those.
The whatever the
Eisner
was
nominated Batgirl that you dropped.
Yeah, I know. But it was very strange for me because Rebirth, unlike New 52, I was suddenly okay with dropping stuff and not continuing, not getting a run. So, for example, Nightwing, you guys know how much I love Nightwing, the character. Like we talked about with Superman, it seemed like we were getting the greatest hits of Nightwing villains, and now Bloodhaven. They announced him going to Bloodhaven. I was like, I'm done. I don't need to see this again. It played out in a slightly new fashion. It was like a new coat of paint on the same old building for me, and so I dropped it. And in fact, ever since the Rebirth stuff has been coming out over a year ago, I've been systematically dropping books, and now I'm down to there are a few. I've got 3, 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 right now on my poll, and 3 or 4 of them I'm going to be dropping soon, or I'm seriously considering dropping. Wonder Woman is one of them. In fact, I was going to drop it after the announcement that Rucka was leaving the book, but then they talked about the new creative team, and I thought, well, I'll give that a shot just to see what's different. Maybe because I really like Wonder Woman. I really want to support a Wonder Woman book, so maybe that'll turn it around for me. But otherwise, if I drop all those books, I'll be down to 6 monthly, whether it's twice or single, but a month, I'll be down to 6 DC books, and that's probably the lowest I've ever been in decades. And so I guess from that standpoint, I don't know that Rebirth has been successful for me. It kind of bothers me
like
a little
huge
bit.
Failure.
Yeah.
And so can you actually put a finger on what it is? I mean, is it the fact that they've just shrunk it down to being, basically Justice League characters, or
I think it's a small part. It's
tired of starting over again.
No, it's not that, because we've been through so many relaunches.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I don't think that phases me at all.
I agree with you on the aspect of it seems like there's a few of these books that are kind of retelling the stories we've already told, and they just kind of barely tweaked it, so it's not like they've put a twist on the story even.
Mm-hmm.
Blue Beetle is an example that drives me crazy. I like Jaime Reyes. I like that version of Blue Beetle. The New 52 Blue Beetle was a serious problem because all they were literally doing was retelling the story that was told right before the New 52 started out.
Yeah, I thought so.
And the Rebirth one is literally, there's stuff that is different. They've kind of floated Dr. Fate in there. They're back to questioning, is it a magic thing, or is it a science thing? Because the original Blue Beetle, it was supposedly was a magic, kind of thing, the original character. But so much of what they're doing, they're literally treading over the same stuff. They're in the same town, which I get, same characters acting the same way with the same relatives that are, potentially villains and whatnot. It really feels like the same thing. And you kind of wonder how many I get, part of me laughs because part of superhero comics is you inevitably fight. You have your cast of villains, and you're always going back, and you're always fighting them. And so to complain about that is kind of silly in one way, because
sure.
You look at the breadth of some of these characters that have been around a long time. That's literally all they've been doing. New writers come along, tell it a little bit different, but it's kind of the same thing. So why are we complaining about it? But it's because it's so close to a mirror image of what we just read that it's
right.
like, come on, that wasn't that great to literally be retelling it, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. Huh. It's interesting that you're, I know I'm going to be dropping a bunch more here soon, but I won't be down that far. Batman's my biggest disappointment because I was super excited with Tom King on it, and it has just been weird. It has been, for me, the entire experience has been weird. Plenty of videos since Rebirth has come out of me complaining about the Batman book. about how it doesn't feel like Batman. I don't understand what it is, kind of a thing. There are aspects I like. There's occasional issues that I think are really good, that I've really enjoyed. But that book frustrates me just because the creators that are on the book, I have this other expectation for, and the other stuff that they write, Takam, right? The Vision, Sheriff of Babylon, those books were so good that it just, to me, the Batman seems really strange that it isn't somehow on the same level as that. And every 2 weeks when I get that book, I struggle with trying to wrap my brain around what is jamming this book up. Is it editorial? Is it, he can't really do anything with Batman because they won't let him. He doesn't really have any ideas for Batman. I don't know.
See, I totally disagree with you. I think he has lots of ideas. They're just different.
I guess, but I'm not getting it.
Feel right.
Usually, even if I don't like something, I get why the story's being told the way it is, and maybe I've read too many comic books. Maybe I'm getting illiterately dumb. I do not get parts of the story. I get the Bane stuff. I did not get the whole beginning of that thing, and the whole. I guess the tone from him riding the airplane down in the first issue and the whole "did I have a good life" thing just threw me off the rails so far, because I just thought that was such a weird thing for Batman to be saying, that I have not gotten Batman since then.
It's too painful for me to even go through what you're going through with Batman. So now you've got me so that I'll just stick with that one Swamp Thing issue and move on. But, so Eric, I'm curious. So you soon will be down to 6. Are there any of those 6 that you're loving, or are those even kind of all at the bottom of your reading pile?
Well, I was loving Superman and Action together.
Like I was.
I agree with you that the whole Reborn thing kind of threw a hiccup into it, but I think that they're going to right the ship. And I'm looking forward to what's coming up. I don't remember what they're calling it now. The next kind of Reborn type of thing that they're going to throw in there.
You're looking forward to it?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just find that funny. Because we just said how Reborn ruined it, and you're looking forward to the next one.
It's not like Reborn. It's just whatever the next kind of storyline that they're throwing out there is.
See where they're going next.
Yeah. There's the Tomasi and Gleason are as the writers, and I remember all the artists now. That's the one thing about Rebirth that I'm having a real hard time with when I talk about these books in general, is because they have so many artists, alternating in and out all the time. I have a hard time remembering who's working on it, which is bad.
Right, it's mostly for the Superman book. It's mostly either Gleason or it's Mankey, right? Is who's
the third one that shows up a bit.
Yeah, and then Zurcher's on Action, and I don't remember the other person on that book either. But
yeah,
but I hear those artists are changing, coming up here pretty quick. So.
Probably, yeah.
But I feel for the most of the part, they've handled the art switching back and forth pretty well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the
some Marvel comics that do that. I find it very jarring. But.
Yeah, I think that's one of the good things about this initiative, this new approach. They've done pretty well for the most part.
Yeah. So, well, it's interesting though that they've really kind of lost you as, a deep DC fan. I theorized that all this apologizing for the New 52 and blaming what they did in the New 52 for the decline in sales was all wrong. That the big decline in sales came because of Convergence. I think that's what it was called, where they stopped the entire line for 2 months.
Well, they moved to Burbank.
It wasn't that New 52 was bad. It was they did some bad events that killed them.
Forever Evil.
Well, but I also agree that there was,
yeah, Forever Evil too. Maybe. I don't know.
I do agree though that there was something missing, and but
you were buying more of them. You were liking more of them.
That's true, but at the same time, that is one of the aspects that makes me not like Rebirth. I guess is that there was something missing in the New 52 for me as a reader. And yet when they try to reintroduce some of that stuff into Rebirth, I also reacted negatively to it. So it's for me, as a longtime reader, it was just a weird sense or a weird reaction, I guess, to what was missing, to what they were trying to bring back in, and neither was working for me. So, and now, like I said, now I'm going to be down to a few number of books, and I'm in a weird place with DC right now, and I don't understand it, and I don't like it.
And it sounds like you've stuck through all kinds of events that soured things for a while, and you just kept plugging on, but now you're not. I
am more willing now because of all this stuff leading up, through Rebirth now, especially with Rebirth, to just walk away, to let things lay there, and I may come back to them, I may not, and I'm okay with it now. It's very strange.
Is that you finally giving up the collector?
I think so.
The collector mentality versus, and embracing more the reader mentality.
Yeah. I guess you could say that.
And so does the relaunch, all new number ones and whatnot. So you're not, it's a new volume, so it's easier to walk away from it than if this was, Nightwing number 89 or whatever it would be on. If it had stayed the original volume, would it have been harder to walk away from?
No, not at this point. I don't think so.
Yeah. I just wondered if that makes it easier. It all starting over again and then starting over again. If it makes it easier to go, yeah, I'm only invested 6 issues into this current volume. It's easier for me to walk away from it than if it, something I've been reading for, whatever. Well, no, but you don't really look at it that way though, right? You don't look at it as volumes though. You're just, it's Nightwing. You've been reading it. I'm just shocked to hear you're not reading Nightwing anymore.
Yeah, me too.
Well, now see, I say that, and because I dropped it when they announced Bloodhaven, and more importantly, the villain, Blockbuster, because I hated that storyline in the original or the previous volume of Nightwing, two previous volumes. I don't whatever it was, pre-Flashpoint version, right? And so I hated that. So it was easy for me to drop that, but now I see in the latest previews that they're doing something else. So I might jump back on. But that's, like I said, that's the thing I've learned about, or I've learned through Rebirth, is that I'm okay with getting just a storyline, dropping it, coming back to it. So, but we should wrap up because I've kept you guys up late. Travis, you were right. We made it to 10.
I told you there's no way we weren't going 2 hours.
But so despite my misgivings, my disappointment, perhaps, that might be too strong of a word, but the situation I find myself in because of Rebirth, I still am looking forward to. I know it seems to be a minority opinion about Doomsday Clock and what that may entail. And more importantly, there were things that they talked about at that announcement over a year ago that they haven't done yet. That they brought up specifically that I'm anxious to see. I want to see the Legion of superheroes come back in a good way. They talked about the JSA. They're playing around with that a little bit right now. They talked about New Gods, and here we have in previews. I know it's tied to Kirby's 100th birthday, but they're throwing stuff in with New Gods finally, so that's good. They talked about Shazam. I could give or take that at the moment because I hate the way that John's there we go. That's a good example. John's ruined Captain Marvel for me. So there are things that they talked about that haven't appeared yet. Where as a longtime fan, I am anxious and looking forward to reading when that stuff comes out. Hopefully.
So basically, you like most the part that Travis and I hate the most.
What's that? Explain that.
The Watchmen button plot line that's threading through things is what seems to interest you the most of what's currently going on.
It's not so much the Watchmen aspect of it. It's just this. They introduced this concept in Rebirth, and it's a universe level thing, right?
Right.
That's what I like. Whether it's Watchmen or it's the Anti-Monitor, whatever.
Right.
I love the cosmic level stuff that they play with, and and how that affects these characters that we read, month in and month out. I like that interplay. I like that expansion of the universe. So that's really what I'm engaged with or interacting with.
I like that stuff, but I want it to be delivered as its own package, I guess, and then allow.
But you hate events.
And then allow, but I buy most of the DC ones, even though I say I hate them. And then allow the writers to take what was done there and do what they want to do with it, as opposed to having some editorial director, some group editor saying, this is how you're all going to use this stuff. Instead of them reading it and being inspired by whatever happening, in the DC, the Rebirth stuff, and being inspired to do their own whatever take on that, having some heavy directorial saying, this is how it's all going to be used there. I wouldn't find that inspiring as a creative person. I understand that these are not anybody's babies. This is all corporate stuff. I mean, I get all of that. But I still think that it would be better if if that's how it was delivered, that then they could take it and use it however they chose to use it, as opposed to it being directed all for them and whatnot.
You mean like Tom King's doing on Batman?
Sure. I'm still buying the book, because I'm still curious as to how it all works. I'm not reading it because I'm super excited about it. I'm reading it because I just want to understand how this version of it all works. And I find that interesting. I can find something interesting and not enjoy it at the same time too. So I don't know. I don't have a problem with the event book as long as it doesn't bog down. And I think that's kind of what Damian is saying to some degree too. Have it be its own thing. Don't have it stop my storyline that I'm reading currently, and allow the people who, and I'm adding this part, so Damian, tell me if I'm wrong, allow them to take this universe changing whatever it was and do their thing with it, whatever that may be, whether they choose to touch it or they don't choose to touch it, kind of a thing. I mean, clearly I understand there are some characters that for the universe changing whatever, it's going to affect them directly. So bummer if you're the Superman writer and you don't want to deal with that stuff, and this whole core of whatever is going to dramatically have to do with Superman, you're stuck, I guess. But every other title that might somehow be in the sphere of the Superman universe shouldn't have to be blown up because of whatever's going on there, I guess. I don't know. That's my take on it. Because some of those big event books I loved. Of course, I love the original event book, Crisis. I love that. I mean, I still go back and read that. I shouldn't, because I've got so many fingerprints over that first, issue of the comic. But I love that. I could go back over that press stuff, and all the time. I liked 52. That weekly book. I didn't read it weekly. I read it in trades, but I loved that. I mean, that was some cool stuff. And that changed some of the regular books. Maybe I would have been frustrated if I was reading it at the time and it was changing those books. But because I didn't read it that way, I guess I enjoyed it. So I don't know. Maybe because I'm reading monthly, that stuff frustrates me. Maybe if I read it not monthly, it wouldn't frustrate me so much. I don't know.
Yeah, as a weekly and monthly reader, I think I become a event dodger as much as possible. Whereas, I like going back and reading Crisis on Infinite Earths. I like going back. Well, I haven't done it yet, but I will probably enjoy reading 52. I actually got out of the library the trade of Avengers versus X-Men, which I hated at the time, and I enjoyed reading it in a trade. It was just an interesting novelty. But when it's part of your ongoing reading experience, I think 9 times out of 10 events just really derail things.
Well, I'll say this about the button thing. That irritated me so much, how that ended, and then basically gave us the shield, the Doomsday Clock at that moment, and I'm sticking to it. I'm not getting the dark metal stuff. I do not care. Anything that remotely seems in the DC universe that seems like it is, some sort of earth-shattering, changing everything. If it's not in a direct comic that I'm reading, I'm not touching it.
Right.
Wait. That it sounds like to me you're contradicting what you just said about.
You're right. I am.
Okay.
I am. But this pissed me off enough. The button made me angry enough that was just to me was such a colossal waste of whatever, of everything.
Wait. So the button pushed your button?
Yes, it did. Clearly it did.
All right.
So I will pick all that stuff up in a trade or whatever. I just do not care. The shenanigans, that left enough of a blah taste in my mouth that I'm.
So I want to. Sounds like we're all kind of down on certain aspects of DC Comics right now, but I want to end positively from my perspective. I still love DC Comics. I still love those characters. I still love the universe. It's just I because I love it so much. I want it to be better.
Yes.
Than what I have. But like I said before, comics is cyclical. So eventually we'll get something else and we'll be very excited about it, just like we were when Rebirth was announced.
Is the whole Mr. Miracle, is that considered part of the DC universe proper, or is it going to be kind of its own thing?
I think it is actually.
I'm super excited about that. I'm being all downer and whatnot and downer about Superman, but there have been some issues that have just come out recently, even after the whole, kind of Superman being changed that I've really loved. There are a lot of DC books that I am enjoying reading. I love that one of the last Superman issues with Lois running around, being chased by the weird people that are in the town now. And I love that issue. She was awesome in that. I was tickled all the way through that. So, so there's still lots of fun stuff going on in it. It's weird. I know a lot of people hated the New 52. It broke a lot of stuff, chased away fans and stuff. I was excited by it. I thought it was a good thing. It brought in lapsed readers. I thought, people like Damian started going back into DC books and whatnot. I met lots of new comic book readers that had never read comic books, and with all these kind of new things coming out, they kind of saw some of the ads. They all started getting into comics. So that was great. I haven't had that experience with the Rebirth stuff. I haven't heard about the people who got all angry at New 52 and walked away from DC and swore they'd never buy it again. I have not heard of them coming back because supposedly DC was bringing back in that stuff. I don't think that pulled in those people. I have no idea. I just haven't heard a lot of that kind of stuff, which with the New 52, it just seemed like it brought in people. I don't know that the Rebirth brought in people, but it did to some degree, because I guess I do know guys. There's a group of guys on Twitter that were pretty much not reading DC books, and now they're reading a bunch of DC books again, I guess. So I don't know.
Yeah, to me, it's still a success. I'm just waiting for the events to ruin it, and the events have not been very big yet.
Yeah.
And so it's when they get big that it will.
They kind of swore off them. They kind of said, we're not doing these for a while.
Right.
Yeah, they did. They said that specifically. They weren't going to be doing stuff like that.
Bless them.
And I think, Marvel just went to the event well too often. And I personally think that's why they have problems now. I think sometimes, like, you do things that draw in new readers, but then these big events happen and the new reader's like, what's going on here? And then the new reader falls away again. That was my impression of the New 52, that it slowly whittled away a lot of those new readers with too much stuff going on with the one I was complaining about before. Cohesion? No.
Convergence
being the final straw, I think.
Yeah, that was not
no one came back to DC after Convergence. Not no one, because we all did, but
yeah,
a lot of people did. And I read a lot less DC after Convergence.
Yeah. Okay, is there like I said, we're running long here. It's getting late for us. We're old men. Is there anything else we want to say? The last thoughts about DC Rebirth? And the silence speaks volumes.
I was gonna say, I think I've got
I'm just curious how long before they have to reboot again.
Oh God,
another 6 years, or will they do it in 2 years?
I hope to God they never do it again.
I think it's inevitable. They have to do it, or they have to seem to do it.
Okay. Well, on that dour note,
yeah.
All right, let's get out of here, guys. Thank you so much for joining me on this discussion. I specifically wanted to talk to you two about this stuff, and you certainly did not disappoint in the points you brought up and the diatribes you may have thrown out there, Travis. No, seriously, this is great. This is exactly the kind of conversation I like to have with people about the medium that we all love. You know, we can love it, but man, we can complain about it too. I think that's perfectly okay. We complain because we love it so much. Exactly. All right. Why don't you guys, Damian, you go first. Why don't you remind the fine folks out there where they can find you and listen to your particular great thoughts about comics?
Okay. Yes, I'm on YouTube. I do a comics vlogish kind of channel called Sleepy Reader 666, and it's irregular but pretty frequent.
Good stuff. And yes, Travis, you can find me on Phil's Thoughts, all one word, on Phil's Thoughts on YouTube. I'm around just about every weekend with a group of comic book friends yakking about the week's worth of comics, basically. Yeah.
All right. And I am still Eric, about to turn into a pumpkin. You can always go to longboxreview.com and people can leave comments there. So I hope we get some conversation about this. I imagine that there's some people out there who may disagree with us on various things that we brought up, or maybe even agree with us. Who knows? But I'd like to hear from you. You can always email me as well at longboxreview@gmail.com, or just hit me up on Twitter. That's always a good and easy, fast way to engage me. And you guys are on Twitter as well. On Twitter as well. And I'll have links in the show notes for all this stuff. So again, thank you guys so much for this conversation. And I will talk to everyone soon. Bye, guys. Bye-bye.